President Trump promises to impose tariffs on Mexican imports starting June 10th if Mexico doesn't stop the illegal flow of immigrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. According to the Trump administration, the initial tariffs would be 5% and increase 5% each month. This is a move the president says would prompt American companies south of the border to return to the U.S.
About the tariffs, business advocates, companies, and trade groups are using words like short-sighted, harmful, and counterproductive. Joining us to discuss the potential impact of imposing tariffs on Mexico is former Ambassador Tony Wayne. Mr. Wayne served as a U.S. ambassador to Mexico and Argentina and was the deputy ambassador in Afghanistan. He's now a public policy fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I want to welcome Ambassador Wayne to the table here at Rising. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be
And you were a career ambassador, right? Not political.
I was,
okay,
yes.
Great.
So what needs to happen here, first to get the administration to agree that Mexico is doing enough, that tariffs should not go into effect? What is Mexico supposed to do?
Well, some of the tweets have suggested they have to stop all immigrants from getting to the U.S. border. Now that would be an impossible task. It's a big country, a big border in the south. But I think what people are looking for is a significant reduction in the very large flows that have been happening in recent months. And that is possible, but what it means is the Mexicans really have to build up their capacity to manage these flows of people. They just don't have the kind of immigration resources that we do to help monitor people entering their country in the south and then flowing through the country to the north. But ministers are going to be here this week from Mexico to sit down with their U.S. cabinet counterparts and others and try to work out some solutions.
Let's say they did try to satisfy the president's demand. How long do you think it would take them to get up to speed with the capacity to really stem the tide of migrants moving through the country?
It would take several years, and it would take investment and resources that right now they don't have in their budget because they are implementing an austerity budget in Mexico under the new president, who's trying to introduce social reform, so he's cut back a lot of other programs. It takes time to train people, as you know. So they would probably need some resource help to make this happen. And there are two things to consider here. One is the push factors, what's pushing people to leave their country. It's not easy to go from Guatemala or Honduras to the United States. So there are things pushing these people out. And then there are the pull factors. And ironically, some of the pull factors are people being told, hey, the U.S. is going to close the border, you better go now. And so a lot of people see this as their last chance maybe to get to the United States to escape their current situation, so they're heading north. So you have to deal with both of those and then care for these people and manage them in between their home and when they get up to the United States, and hopefully divert a number of them, turn a number of them around, and care for others who have good reasons to leave and fear for their lives.
And was this the right thing for the administration, or perhaps is this one of the right things for them to do? I mean, is this the proper tool, the proper approach?
I don't think mixing immigrations and trade tariffs is a good approach to things. I mean, we can look at it from several angles. One, we just negotiated a new trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, which we're trying to get the 3 Congresses in each country to approve. So then you have this going forward, and then all of a sudden you have an unprecedented mixing of you're not performing on immigration, so we're going to impose new tariffs. What signal does that send both to your neighbors and then to other potential partners looking at trade agreements with the United States? And this is the first time that a president has ever used this emergency authority to apply such a broad range of tariffs on other countries. In fact, I think any tariffs under this law. So it's unprecedented. U.S. companies are very worried of the costs that it's going to impose, and they're saying with some correctness, this is really a tax on U.S. consumers, on U.S. companies, as well as on Mexicans, because we build so much together. I mean, 50% of the trade in North America are in what are called intermediate goods. That means they go into the final products put together in another country. We just have this big machine in North America where we build together. And this is imposing a cost on that.
Was there a better way for the administration, though, to get compliance from Mexico on this issue of stopping this inflow from Central America? I mean, there must have been some kind of a stick and not just carrots to induce this change in behavior.
Well, there are a number of potential sticks. Being a career diplomat, what I would have liked to have seen was several months ago calling a meeting of ministers from both countries, setting up a process for intense negotiations to make progress on specifics, and there's a whole bunch that can be addressed, and then seeing if you could make progress in doing that. Rather, it's been a really episodic engagement between the two countries. And the engagement needs not just to be between the U.S. and Mexico. You have to get the Central Americans involved, but also you need Congress to be involved here, because some of the problems are shortages of staff and resources on the U.S. border. If we had more asylum judges out there at the border, we could deal with these people really quickly when they arrive and send them back in a rapid fashion. We just can't do that because we have this big shortage and a really large backlog of people from several years ago.
Buck, you've been down at the border a bunch. Did the border guys that you talked to down there have much to say about the cooperation or engagement with the Mexican side of the immigration flow?
Well, yeah, I mean, to the ambassador, one thing that they bring up regularly is that it's not illegal for anyone to leave Mexican soil and enter into the United States. So they would claim that there's no legal mechanism in place to set up along the border and try to stop people. And this obviously is a problem for cartel lookouts and for coyotes and all the different apparatus that's at the border. They can sit and watch and see that there are guys who are about to come across the border, but they say that they're not violating Mexican law by crossing over onto U.S. soil. So is that something that could change?
Well, there could be a change of policy. And so you have, in Mexico, they have to sort this out, this policy out. The new president of Mexico promised, we're going to treat migrants with respect and respect their human rights. We're going to care for them, because the previous administration, under the previous administration, there'd been a lot of abuse of migrants trying to get to the United States by criminals, by corrupt officials and others. So they have to figure out, how can we respect their human rights, and how can we not be creating a big problem with our neighbor? How can we not be interfering in U.S. politics by letting so many people get across the border, get up to the border, and then try to claim asylum? And they have to do that without really having the human tools to do it effectively. And they just, he came to office December 1st, so they haven't been in power that long, and they're really grappling with this. It's a really tough issue. Just think of how long we've been debating immigration policy in the United States, what our policy should be. The Mexicans have their own version of that same debate.
All right,
there's a possibility that we could go up 5% a month in tariffs over the next several months, up 25%, right? Would that hurt the Mexican ability to meet our demands? Will we be pulling money out of the Mexican treasury?
Yes, it would, in the sense that hurting their economic growth would reduce their resources to actually invest. And we have to remember that one of the reasons we started the North American Trade Agreement way back in the early 90s was so Mexico could get wealthier, so its citizens would not be coming to the United States in such numbers. And in fact, since 2007, more Mexicans have been going back to Mexico than coming to the United States. So that was a long-term strategic success. So we really have to think very seriously about what the secondary and third level effects are going to be of this kind of a retaliatory policy. Plus, the Mexicans will probably need to put tariffs on our goods if this actually goes ahead.
All right, Ambassador Wayne, thanks so much. We appreciate it, sir.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Next on Rising, 30 years ago, the Tiananmen Square massacre shocked the world, but also signaled hope for democracy in China.
Are those aspirations farther out of reach today? We dive into why democracy never materialized and what might lie in China's future when Rising continues.